I never thought I'd say this out loud, let alone to strangers on the internet. But after everything that happened with Caleb, I need to get this off my chest. Maybe I'm looking for forgiveness, or maybe I just want someone to understand. I know what I did crosses every line a mother figure should never cross. But that night, when I saw the pain in his eyes, I couldn't turn away. I just couldn't. I know what I did was wrong. Not just wrong, it broke a boundary I should have never come near. But when I looked into Caleb's eyes that night, I saw something that made me hesitate. I saw myself. This isn't easy to tell. I've kept it hidden in the quiet corners of my mind, convincing myself that silence would make it go away. But silence doesn't heal, it haunts. Caleb is my stepson, my husband's only child. I've been part of his life since he was 13, watching him grow, stumble, recover. I became the woman who signed his permission slips, baked his birthday cakes, clapped too loudly at his school plays. And somewhere along the way, we stopped being just stepmother and stepson. We became survivors under the same roof, of neglect, of loneliness, of feeling unseen. I never intended to hurt him, or myself, but when two people are drowning, sometimes they reach for the closest thing to stay afloat, even if it pulls them both under. You can judge me, I won't blame you, I'd probably judge me too. But all I ask is that you listen before you decide who I am. Because sometimes the worst decisions aren't made out of lust or thrill. They're made out of longing, out of a desperate, hollow ache to matter to someone. That night, I didn't feel like a stepmother. I didn't feel like a woman crossing a line. I just felt human, and horribly, painfully seen. Our house had grown quiet over the years. Not peaceful, just empty. Mark, my husband, had long since stopped trying. Conversations between us were brief, transactional, groceries, bills, car repairs, nothing more. We slept in the same bed but lived in separate worlds. He hadn't touched me in nearly 8 months, and I stopped wondering why a long time ago. I filled my days with work, laundry, errands, podcasts. I filled the evenings with wine and silence. And when Caleb moved back in after his breakup, I thought maybe the walls would stop echoing so much. At first, it was just nice to have someone else there. His presence felt warm, like the hum of a radio left on low in the background. He'd leave his shoes by the door, forget his coffee mug in the sink, fall asleep on the couch with the TV still playing. It felt alive. He was quieter than I remembered, more withdrawn. His breakup with Jenna had clearly left wounds deeper than he let on. And he tried to hide it, but I noticed the little things. The long stares into nothing. The restless pacing at night. The way his laughter never quite reached his eyes. I tried not to pry. I told myself it wasn't my place. But something in me, maybe the maternal part, maybe just the lonely part, started to lean in. Not physically, not yet. But emotionally, the lines were already starting to blur. And when you're starved for connection, even a glance can feel like a touch. It happened on a Friday night. I came home late from work. Mark was out of town. The house was dark except for the kitchen light. Caleb was sitting at the table, slumped over, fingers clenched tightly around a glass of water. He didn't look up when I walked in, just kept staring down like the world had dropped something on his shoulders and left him there to carry it. "Hey," I said gently, "you okay?" He didn't answer. So I sat down across from him, waited. Finally, his voice came, barely more than a whisper. "She told everyone." I blinked. "Who?" "Jenna. She told people that I couldn't do it, that I freaked out, that I'm broken." The words hit me like ice. He let out a hollow laugh. "Now everyone at school thinks I'm some kind of joke. Some pathetic guy who couldn't get it up." He looked up at me then, eyes red, jaw clenched, humiliation carved into every line of his face. I wanted to reach across the table. I wanted to hold him, to take away the sting. But I just sat there, heart aching. I didn't even pressure her. He said, I was respectful, careful, but she acted like I was disgusting. He exhaled sharply, eyes dropping again. Am I that messed up? I couldn't stop myself. I reached across, placing my hand gently over his. He flinched but didn't pull away. You're not messed up, I said quietly. You're hurting. He nodded, lips trembling. I just wanted someone to want me back, he whispered. And in that moment, I felt something inside me crack open. Because I knew that ache. Intimately. And it terrified me how much I understood him. We didn't talk about it, not the conversation. Not what he'd confessed, but it lingered, it colored everything. The way he looked at me felt different. Not bolder, but more exposed, like he'd taken off some emotional armor and left it in my hands. One morning, I passed by the bathroom door and it wasn't fully closed. I caught a glimpse of his back. The towel slung low, the steam clinging to his skin. I looked away immediately, but something stayed with me. Something I didn't want to name. Later, I found one of his t-shirts mixed in with my laundry. I held it too long before folding it. It smelled like him, like soap and something unspoken. We began crossing paths more often. In the hallway, on the porch. He lingered, I lingered. A glance lasted a little too long. A silence felt a little too full. I tried to convince myself it was just maternal instinct. That I was being overprotective. That I felt for him the way any woman would feel for someone hurting. But then I'd catch myself waiting to hear his footsteps in the morning. Smiling at the sound of his laugh in the other room. This wasn't motherhood. This was something else. And I hated that it thrilled me. I hated that part of me, the part long ignored, long silenced, was waking up. And worst of all, it didn't want to go back to sleep. I was in the kitchen rinsing dishes when I heard the back door creak open. Caleb stepped in, soaked from the rain, hoodie clinging to his shoulders. He looked like he'd been walking for hours. Everything okay? I asked, drying my hands. He didn't answer, just stood there, water dripping onto the floor. Then he said, "Do you ever feel like you're the only one in the world who actually feels anything?" The question wasn't rhetorical. It landed heavy. All the time, I replied softly. He moved closer, slow, careful. His eyes were glassy, not from tears, but from something deeper, a quiet unraveling. I keep thinking maybe there's something wrong with me, he said, like, maybe I care too much, want too much, I scare people off. You don't scare me, I said before I could stop myself. His eyes locked onto mine. And something inside both of us shifted. A silent understanding passing between us. Dangerous and undeniable. He stepped closer. I didn't move. His hand brushed mine, just barely, but it was enough to set fire to the space between us. I felt my breath hitch. My heart race. I should go shower, he mumbled, stepping back. I nodded, but my legs felt like stone. As he disappeared down the hallway, the air still buzzing in his wake, I leaned back against the counter, gripping it like a lifeline. Because something had cracked open. And I didn't know how to close it again. I didn't expect him to knock. Not that late, not with the storm rattling the windows and the house asleep. But he did, 3 soft taps, then his voice. Emma, can I come in? I froze. My phone was still glowing beside me. Some mindless podcast playing. My heart thudded in my chest. I opened the door. Caleb stood there, in an old t-shirt and flannel pants. Damp hair sticking to his forehead. He looked small. No, that's not right. He looked young, vulnerable. Couldn't sleep, he said. I stepped aside. He didn't wait for me to invite him farther. We sat on opposite ends of the bed. The silence was thick, the air electric. I wrapped the blanket tighter around my legs. I keep replaying it, he said suddenly. That night, what she said, how fast it all changed. I didn't answer. I couldn't. I was too afraid of what might slip out. Why did she treat me like I was disgusting? He whispered. I turned toward him. His eyes were glassy, tired, pleading. "You're not disgusting, Caleb." He nodded, but I could see he didn't believe it. Then he reached out, slowly, and placed his hand over mine. This time, I didn't flinch, and neither did he. "I don't know what this is," he said, "but I don't want to feel invisible anymore." Something inside me cracked. I leaned in, so did he. The kiss was tentative, warm, sad. I wish I could say I pulled away. I wish I could say I stopped him. But I didn't, because in that moment, it wasn't about right or wrong. It was about needing to be held. When it was over, we sat in silence again. "I'm sorry," he whispered. I shook my head. Me too. And yet neither of us moved. We just stayed there, suspended in something fragile and irreversible. Because we both knew. That was the night everything changed. The next morning, everything felt quieter. Not calm, not peaceful, just the kind of quiet that follows something loud and irreversible, like the air itself was pretending nothing happened. I stood in the kitchen, hands wrapped around a mug of coffee I couldn't bring myself to sip. Caleb's door was closed, locked, no sounds, no footsteps, just silence. I replayed the night over and over, looking for the second I should have stopped, the moment I should have said, "No, this isn't okay," but instead, I let it happen. Worse, I wanted it to. When he finally came out, hours later, his hoodie was up, his eyes low, he didn't meet my gaze. "Morning," I offered, voice too light, too fake. "Hey," he said, barely above a whisper. He walked past me without slowing down. No pause, no glance, just a shadow slipping through the hallway. That moment hurt more than the kiss. Because in it, I saw shame, not just his, mine too. He spent the rest of the day in his room. I knocked once. He didn't answer. I didn't try again. Dinner came and went. Mark called to say he'd be home late. I pretended to care, pretended to be normal. But nothing felt normal anymore. Later that night, I heard soft music coming from Caleb's room, a playlist I'd heard him hum to when he was younger. I stood outside his door, my palm resting against the wood, heart pounding. I almost knocked. Almost. But I didn't. Because I didn't know if I wanted to be forgiven or forgotten. And deep down, I was terrified he already regretted it. Or worse, that he didn't. So I walked away, pretending I hadn't stood there for 5 full minutes. Pretending the floor wasn't shifting beneath both our feet. Pretending last night was just a bad dream we could wake up from. Even though we both knew we were wide awake. We played pretend like our lives depended on it. Morning hellos, quick nods, shared silence at dinner, everything wrapped in a shell of forced normalcy that fooled everyone but us. Mark returned that weekend, oblivious as always. He asked how Caleb was doing. I said, "Fine." Caleb grunted from across the room. That was enough to satisfy him. I kept myself busy. Laundry, grocery runs, cleaning drawers that hadn't been opened in years. Anything to keep from thinking. But the thoughts still came. Every time Caleb brushed past me in the hallway. Every time his fingers trembled when he handed me a dish. Every time I found myself staring just a second too long. We never spoke of that night. But the air between us did. One afternoon, I caught him watching me from the porch. Just watching, like he was trying to figure something out. I didn't smile. I didn't look away. I just stood there, daring him to say something. But he didn't. He turned and walked inside. That night, I sat on the edge of my bed holding one of his sweatshirts he'd left in the laundry. I told myself I was folding it, but my hands lingered, my breath hitched. And then I pressed it to my face. Not because I wanted him, but because I missed being wanted. There's a difference, I think. But not one the world would care to understand. So I folded the sweatshirt, pressed it to the bottom of his clean laundry pile, and carried the weight of that moment like a bruise under the skin, hidden, but pulsing. We weren't moving forward, we were standing still. Trapped in a story neither of us knew how to end. I haven't told a soul. Not my sister, not my best friend, not even the therapist I stopped seeing months ago. Because how do you say something like this out loud? I crossed a line with my stepson. You don't, you bury it, you smooth over the edges in your head. You rename it, a mistake, a moment, an accident. But that night wasn't an accident. It was a choice. And I've been choking on that truth ever since. Sometimes I stare at myself in the bathroom mirror, daring my reflection to say it first, to call me what I fear I am. But she doesn't, she just stares back, tired, haunted, hollow. The worst part? I don't even know if I regret it. Because in that moment, I didn't feel wicked, I didn't feel shame. I felt seen. And for someone who's spent years being invisible, to her husband, to herself, that feeling was intoxicating. I've started avoiding eye contact with Caleb. It's easier that way, easier than seeing that look again, the one that says he's still holding on to something he doesn't know how to name. Sometimes I catch him lingering in the doorway, like he wants to say something, like he wants me to. But neither of us does. Because we're both afraid of what might come next. I've been sleeping less, thinking more, replaying everything, wondering if the universe keeps a ledger. If this moment will be paid for later in ways I can't yet imagine. What if Caleb tells someone? What if he doesn't? What if the guilt never fades? Or worse, what if the feeling never does either? These are the things I can't say out loud. So instead, I fold laundry, I cook dinner, I smile at Mark when he walks in the door. And I keep pretending I'm still the kind of woman who could never do what I've already done. I lie awake most nights, staring at the ceiling, begging the dark for answers. What do you call a moment that wasn't planned, but wasn't stopped either? What do you call a wound that comforted you while it bled? Sometimes I imagine rewinding the tape, stopping myself at the doorway, turning away from his eyes, pretending I didn't hear the tremble in his voice. But I didn't. And now, every interaction is laced with a weight neither of us can name. Every silence is full, every glance, loaded, every step, uncertain. I don't know what we are now. I don't know if we're healing or sinking, if we crossed a line or simply exposed one that had already been blurred long ago. What I do know is this: Caleb looked at me like I was the only solid thing in a world that kept letting him fall. And I wanted to be that for him, just once. So tell me, if your son, or your stepson, came to you broken, humiliated, lost, and you saw in his eyes the same loneliness you've been drowning in for years, would you have turned away? Would you have shut the door? Or would you have stayed? Just a moment longer. Long enough to make him feel seen. Long enough to remember what it was like to be needed. Long enough to fall. I know what I did. I also know why. And maybe that's the part that scares me the most.